Hey everybody, and welcome to Maryanne Live. I'm Maryanne Comaroto, and like I always say, great relationships begin within. And I mean way down deep inside, way down in that soul of yours, that area that is beneath the television remote control unit. It's beyond your cell phone. It's not connected to your computer, I promise, at least not yet. So take a moment, because I know you're here because you're interested in taking that deeper journey inside yourself, connecting inside. Go ahead and find your breath. Let your shoulders drop away from your earlobes. Mine think they're earrings sometimes. They just migrate up. We are so full. Our plates are full. Our lives are full. Go ahead and breathe and let yourself have the gift of your own attention. Just for a moment. You too, Ted. Yeah, very simple gift we can give ourselves. And the next thing I'd like to do before we introduce our guest today, Ted Slingerland, who's written an amazing book, Don't You Know? Trying Not to Try, which is what we're going to do right now. We're going to try not to try to breathe. We're just going to be in relationship with our breath, as well as the portal that I call gratitude. That's a word that a lot of people are talking about this last decade. Gratitude. What does that mean? For some people, they cringe when they hear the word. It's become a cliche. For other people, they have a really strong resonance with the reality for them that gratitude is a portal to some other way of being. It's an opportunity to become internally referenced. So go ahead and, just for fun, make a note of all the folks that make it possible for you to do what you're doing right now, or what you did 5 minutes ago. You'll be surprised, the list is long. What are you sitting on? What are you wearing? What products did you use to get ready today? What car are you driving, bicycle or public transportation? What food did you put in your body? Hundreds, if not thousands, of people come together every day to make it possible for us to do the smallest to largest acts, to perform all of the deeds that we do towards the end of the day. And I don't know about you, but it immediately brings a smile to my face and a kind of center of compassion. I remember driving up through the Central Valley recently in California, and I looked out my window and saw this beautiful field filled with people bent over, and I knew that they were pulling fruit, vegetables off of vines and so on, and that was part of my dinner, and I just felt overwhelmed with gratitude. The visual reality that was playing around in my neocortex. I don't know about you, but sometimes we need to have someone massage our frontal lobe, to make those connections, because we're not living in insular worlds really as much as we'd like to think so. Okay, so you're breathing, you're filled with gratitude. Some of the folks who make this program possible, you know who they are. Open Secret Bookstore is one of them. Changing the Way Our Culture Values Women is the National Action Organization, part of what makes this program available for you. And the Avon Breast Cancer Foundation.org if you're online. If you like to move your body and make a difference, the Avon Breast Cancer Foundation is a really unique opportunity to come out, and even if you're in other parts of the world, and be part of finding a cure. Despite all the controversy that cancer is a way that we make money, and don't get me started on that, I believe that anything that we do with really right intention, for the most part, is helpful. So I'm standing by the Avon Breast Cancer Foundation, at least today. Okay, so enough about all the gratitude and the breathing. Let's talk about something really serious, like Wu Wei. Do you know what that is? Have you ever heard of it? What does that even mean? Well, some of you are nodding. You're like, yeah, I know what that is. I love that. The others are wondering if you can eat it. How can it serve you? Is it on your phone? Is it a new app? Well, we're going to find out. Our guest today joining us, Ted Slingerland's in the house. He's written a book, Trying Not to Try is the title of his book. Let me tell you a little bit about Ted. Ted, you there? Folks are staring at you like, oh my God, I see Ted. Ted, welcome to the program. We're glad you're here.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about you, Ted, so don't turn red or anything. But you're you're a professor of Asian Studies and Canada Research Chair in Chinese Thought and Embodied Cognition at the University of British Columbia. So we know you're a smart guy. That high forehead we can see is busy.
Forehead,
yeah, well, there's lots of brains. Yeah, it kind of is, they say. If you're a phrenologist, we'd say, oh my God, you're brilliant, right?
Okay.
You were educated at Princeton, Stanford, and the University of California, Berkeley. Gee, you just couldn't pick one. You had to go to every fabulous school, right? Wow.
I like to move around.
Yeah, it's incredible. And internationally renowned expert in Chinese thought, comparative religion, and cognitive science. You've written over 20 academic journal articles in a range of fields. If anybody's ever tried to write one academic article, never mind have it published as a peer-reviewed journal, you're right now you can't even breathe because this is extraordinary. He's written 20. Written.
I'm old.
You're old. If that can't be right, because if you're old, that means I'm old, and I just refuse to be old right now.
Okay.
We are middle-aged.
Yeah, we're middle-aged.
Right? That means we're right in the middle part, in the sweet spot, they say. I love that. Well, you've also written several scholarly books, including What Science Offers the Humanities and translation of the Analects of Confucius. Wow, we've got to talk a little bit about that. So, right out of the gate, because there are some folks who aren't familiar with your work, Ted, you have a very interesting trajectory here. Talk a little bit about why Asian Studies, what's a comparative religion about, and why all these three fancy schools. Like, who are you and what planet did you come from?
Yeah. Well, I started out actually as a molecular biology major at Princeton.
Wow.
I had a midlife crisis at age 19, so I got things out of the way early, and dropped out of school and rode my motorcycle to California and reinvented myself as an Asian studies person. And
naturally.
They expect some kind of really profound story about how I got into it. I think it's mainly I had read Jack Kerouac.
I knew it.
In Dharma Bum, there's a character named Jaffe, who's actually modeled on Gary Schneider. And he's a grad student at Berkeley in Chinese and Japanese, and hangs out in the hills and drinks wine and reads poetry. And I was like, I like that as a career option. Let's pursue that.
Right.
But I got into Chinese. I was always interested in Chinese philosophy and translation. So when I moved to California, I started studying classical Chinese and early Chinese philosophy. Then I got interested in how some of these themes relate to other philosophical religious traditions. So I was in an Asian studies department, and I wanted to be in a religious studies department. I could do comparative work. So that's where my PhD is actually in religious studies. But then after graduate school, I started to get interested in cognitive science and evolutionary theory because it fit in with my work in various ways. So the last decade or so, one of the reasons I moved to UBC was to be able to work together with psychologists and cognitive scientists up here. So I've had a very strange career trajectory, and it's all charted out in trying not to try in a way because it's all the early Chinese stuff, comparative religion I did, but it's all tied together with contemporary cognitive neuroscience and social psychology and evolutionary theory.
Well, it sounds like, based on the parts of the book that I was able to read, because each chapter really, it's a very readable book, but it's really rich and dense.
Okay. I hear that.
Right? I'm sure. And which is wonderful. I like that. And it's not a plain read, you're not going to read this book and be like, oh wow, and I'm transformed my life. This is a book to study. I'm curious, which is I think a high compliment, because I think it's harder in some ways to write a book like that. It's very thought-provoking and really rich like that.
Yeah, well, there are people, it's been marketed as a self-help book, and that sometimes annoys people who read it who think that there's going to be a little card that'll have some step through way. So it's not that book.
Yeah, I think it's a self with a capital S help book, which is a great differentiation. Self with a little s is sort of more pop psychological, I think, in my reality. And self with a big S, a lot of folks recognize it's an ongoing inquiry. And this is one of those kind of Bible type of books that will really help inform people on their path. Which brings me to my next question. You have been somehow, I don't know if it was a natural connection to yourself, but how is it you found that you were connected to listening to yourself in the way you did? Like, I had a midlife crisis, and I decided to turn inwards. What is that about? Did you grow up in a family that fostered that kind of inquiry?
I don't think so. I don't have my family. I don't think so.
It was a natural thing you had going for yourself.
Yeah, so I really, one of the issues, so, the trying to try about wu-wei, the state of being, the problem is I want people to start using that word because spontaneity is not the best translation, because spontaneity gives you the impression of just randomness, or, you just decide to go to the beach instead of go to work, or we talk about bubbly, outgoing people being spontaneous. So the wu-wei is about this kind of just responsiveness, genuine responsiveness to your situation. And I've always felt like when it comes to career things and kind of what I want to do in life, I've been very wu-wei in the sense that I really just am aware of what's going on and what's working and what's not, and am able to change things that are not working. So at least in the area, when it comes to career choice and things like that, I think it's a dispositional thing. I don't know. Maybe I just read Chinese philosophy as a kid, as a teenager.
Which is really normal. Yeah, lots of teenagers read Chinese philosophy. Come on.
Jung and,
right?
Yeah, my college entrance essay was about Jungian psychology and modern physics and Taoism. Yeah. So, I don't know.
You were a deep guy right out of the gate.
I was a weird kid.
Definitely unusual. Yeah, some of us really relate to that, but you definitely aren't hitting the big mainstream popularity contest, right?
Yeah, no, not me.
Yeah. You were probably the guy that knew a lot of different types of people, right? And were fascinated by them. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was an athlete, so that was the only thing that saved me from getting beat up.
Yes.
Yeah, a leather jacket kind of protects you. You can pretend to be normal.
That's right. Got to pick a group, right?
Yeah.
So, talk a little bit about, for folks who don't understand wu-wei, which is spelled W-U-W-E-I. For folks, many folks, this is a new concept. Let's just talk about it fundamentally. Where it comes from, what part of Asia, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so it's an ideal that originates in early China. So the period I'm talking about is called the Warring States, so roughly 6th to 3rd century BC. It's a time when China is divided between all these different states that are fighting for supremacy, and you've got these philosophers going from state to state peddling their ideas. And it's a very fierce market. Everyone wants to get the edge, right? Because if you don't get things right, your state's going to get taken over and your head chopped off.
Right.
So people were eager to hear new ideas. So I think it's the most interesting period in philosophical religious thought ever. I mean, really interesting. It's when all the major indigenous strains of thought in China get born. So early Confucianism, Taoism, legalism. So it's mainly the Confucians and the Taoists who latch on to this idea of wu-wei. So it's a state where it's a bit like being in the zone in sports. You lose a sense of yourself as an agent. You have a sense of not actually exerting effort. You forget yourself. You're unself-conscious, and yet everything works perfectly. So they want to get you into this state of wu-wei. I also think when you're in this state, you get this power that unfortunately in modern Mandarin is pronounced duh.
I know, I loved reading that duh. That was great.
I can't do anything about that.
Yeah.
But this is one of these words that I leave untranslated in the book because I don't think there's a good equivalent. Sometimes translated as virtue. I think charismatic power is the best you can do. But it's this, when you're in a state of wu-wei, you kick off duh. And if you're a Confucian, it's what makes people want to follow you without you having to try to make them follow you. They just flock to you. If you're a Taoist, it's what allows you to relax other people and kind of untangle their hang-ups and make them relax around you, and that kind of emanates out to the world. Or if you're a Laotian Taoist, it allows you to kind of bring everyone in the world back to naturalness. So you need to be in a state of, for these thinkers, you need to be in a state of wu-wei. You get this powered and that's the key to personal and spiritual and political success. So this is the central goal of all of these early Chinese thinkers.
Got it. Let's talk a little bit about the transvaluation factor here. When you talk about 6th century anything, right, we have to make these giant leaps, especially in the Western culture. We've been an individuated society, you know, just for, you know, I guess we could look back at Plato and Aristotle, and the Enlightenment was the next sort of part 2 of that. But we've certainly become insular in the sense of we think of ourselves as separate beings that are highly motivated to create from these sort of insular senses of ourself. So wu-wei in our culture seems like something people do to try to reduce, for lack of a better idea here, reduce the residual effects for being an individuated person, right? It's like an exercise versus a real ideology or philosophy or a way of being.
Yeah, so there is one of the main arguments in trying to try that since the Enlightenment, so from my perspective relatively recently, the last 200 or 300 years, we have had this very individualistic, disembodied model of excellence that's emphasizing striving and trying and how we're each individual is pursuing our own individual goals and using cost-benefit analysis to navigate. And, you know, you see this with some of the contemporary treatments of spontaneity. So there are some parallels between wu-wei and flow, this idea popularized by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. But flow is also, you see the Western imprint on it because it's about challenge and complexity and kind of pushing yourself to your next level. What I find important about wu-wei and helpful is that it emphasizes that you get into wu-wei by being absorbed into something larger than yourself. So it's not about the individual. It's about the individual actually losing him or herself into something bigger. And for the early Chinese, this is a religious concept. So this bigger thing is this Tao, this metaphysical reality. For contemporary people, it's going to be a variety of things. It could be a religious thing if you're religious in a traditional sense. For a lot of us, I think we just have a set of frameworks that we move in between that give us meaning. So we've got people we care about, we have activities we value. We often have places that are special for us, that we like to go to, types of nature. Even objects sometimes that make us feel connected to something. So wu-wei is about feeling connected to something, people, or a broader framework of meaning. And that's what allows you to be spontaneous and get out of yourself. And that's, I think, an important corrective to this hyper-individuated culture we have.
And even though we could understand or can understand what you're saying intellectually, like my mind, this makes sense in my mind, actually embodying what you're talking about feels like a whole other, you know, can of worms or mountain to climb, right? And partly because I think that the average person is caught up in survival, right? We're busy trying to, the trajectory of that individuated self in the Western culture is epigenetic at this point, right? We have enough generations, I think, I'm not sure, I haven't read a lot about this, but the trajectory of just being human is beyond our conscious self at this point. It's in our bones, it's in our history, our story, blah, blah. And the average person here really subscribes to these kinds of thinking anecdotally, right? You run into a wall, you crash, and then you're like, ooh, way, right? And what you're saying is, and this is it's a whole shift in the orientation of how you're thinking, where you make meaning, right? And is that correct?
Yeah, it's realizing that when you, first of all, there's certain goals in life that just can't be pursued directly. So things like happiness, charisma, creativity, love of learning, they're just by their very nature not things that if you pursue them directly, they run away from you. So
give an example. Be more specific, because this is a really good point.
Okay, well, so one of the examples I use early on in the book, just because it's been popular with my students, is dating. So I think we all have this intuitive sense that if you want to meet someone, you've got to be relaxed and be yourself and be confident. So there's anyone who's been single for any period of time has this experience of when they're single and wanting to meet someone, they can't meet anyone. They're trying too hard, right? So they go out to the bar and they're trying not to look around and look like they're looking for villains, but they are. They're just giving off this energy that makes them very unattractive. And then if you're lucky, something happens. So
you look desperate.
You look desperate, right? You don't have duh.
You don't have duh.
Yeah. And then if you're lucky, something happens, you get distracted, you get into your work, or you just start to enjoy hanging out with your friends, and then it happens. You meet someone, and everything works out. And then suddenly people are coming out of the woodwork throwing themselves at you. So that's the trick. We all know that, but how do you make it happen if you're not really feeling it?
That's right. When we come back after the break, we're going to talk more about how we make that happen without making that happen.
Right.
How to try without trying. These are the paradox of the journey. When you want the good stuff, you got to do the work. Come back and join us right here on MaryanneLive, because that's what we like to do. That's how we roll on MaryanneLive. Don't touch that dial. We'll be back right after these messages. Our guest today is new book, Ted Slingerland, Trying Not to Try. Get a copy. It's available wherever fine books are sold. For those of you joining us during the break, we will be streaming live back right after these messages.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Kermit. I am Jay.
Is that a joke?
No, that's true.
Kermit! I love that name, Kermit. Nice to meet you.
It took me a while to love it as well.
Oh, well, I love it right off the bat, so hopefully that helps that neural pathway. That really fat one that you got made fun of, we'll obliterate that. I'm on your cheerleading squad for that. Well, thanks for helping out.
Oh, okay. So you guys can, if you need to discuss a couple more things about your details for your next 8 minutes, because we're going to go to your first 8 minutes, go right ahead. And when you're ready, I'm ready.
Okay. How you doing, Ted? Are you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Well, I think we're just going to jump right back on the train, Kermit. We're up for it. We're feeling a lot of
We're on the way, Kermit. We got to just keep going.
There you go.
Yeah.
Let's keep it moving.
All right.
So we'll be back in 5, 4, 3.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us on MaryanneLive. I'm Maryanne Comaroto. We're in the house. Ted Slingerland is here with us. We're talking about ooh way. Ooh way. No way. Not no way. Ooh way, right? And I love the spelling. W-U hyphen W-E-I. What is it? You need to get some, but you can't get it, but you got to get it is the thing. And Ted, right before the break, we were talking about how to get it without getting it, and you were using a great example of dating, which so many people out there, either you're single or you're not, right? So you've either been single and you can relate to this story, but Ted, you were telling us giving us a great example of you're hanging out, you're trying to meet someone, but boy, you're trying. So it puts off the vibes that nobody's really that interested in. It makes you look desperate, or you feel awkward, or totally self-conscious at the very minimum. But when you get the duh factor going that we talked about earlier on, and you drop into just being connected or present to whatever's happening, those are my words, something magical happens. You get in that zone, okay? Tell us more. Take us further and deeper, Ted.
Yeah, well, that is the tension, right? And it's not something that can be solved intellectually. So I found myself in this kind of dating drought as a grad student. And I was writing a dissertation on way. So there was some intellectual way to get out of it. I should have known it because I studied this professionally.
Healer, heal thyself.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. So this is, and I'd see there and I'd be like, wow, I'm not being very way, but how did I get out of it?
Right.
So it is a genuine paradox. So one of the things I talk about in Trying Not to Try is why, just from a cognitive scientific perspective, it is directly paradoxical to try not to try. So you're basically using your conscious mind to try to shut your conscious mind down. The thing that's activating is the thing that needs to be activated. Right. So it is impossible to directly pursue. And so you've got to pursue it indirectly. And the bulk of trying to try about these different strategies the early Chinese developed for essentially staking yourself out. I mean, you're trying to trick yourself into being spontaneous somehow. So there are 4 basic strategies. The trying really hard, carving and polishing, and then you'll eventually forget about it, the Confucian strategy.
Like wax on, wax off?
Yeah, basically, that's straight out of Confucian.
Right.
And then suddenly, you're blocking punches and totally in the zone, right? There's the reaction against that, the kind of first hippies, so the early Laotian Taoists who say that trying is going to turn you into a hypocrite. It's going to turn you into an operator. You're going to learn all these techniques, but you won't really feel it. You're going to be a kind of counterfeit of a real person. And so they say, forget everything we've learned, go back to nature, kind of get back in touch with your belly. Don't worry about the desires of your eyes, get back in touch with your belly. So those are primitivists. Then you've got somebody who's kind of trying to be in between this Confucian Mencius, who says we have these potentials to be way within us, but they need to be nourished and helped to grow. So you need to do some work, but you can't push them too hard or you'll hurt them, so you've got to kind of do it in stages and do it in an organic way. And then finally you have this Taoist named Zhuangzi at the end of the period. He says, trying, not trying are all things you got to get out of your head, and you need to just make your mind empty, completely empty. And if you can do that, then there's a kind of wu-wei tendency inside you that will interact with the world, and you can just get yourself out of the way of it. It's unclear how he thought you were going to be able to do this.
Yeah, that's what my next question is.
That's the next question. So there's hints of breathing practices, meditation practices. There's one passage that I think he's taking mushrooms. He's taking right. Taoist masters. Yeah. Something's going on. Yeah. So this is the trick. Is that the guys who essentially say don't try, stop trying, still have to give you something to do. Yeah, right. Because the mind, if you don't think, you're dead. I mean, let's face it, right? The mind thinks. It's what it does. Yeah. So how do you shut it down is the trick. And so, the conclusion, one of the things that has annoyed some people is that there's no answer. It really is a paradox. But I think that having a kind of grab bag of these different strategies, basically these are the 4 logical strategies that exist. They get repeated through the rest of the East religious thought. Right. Is helpful, and which one's most appropriate is really going to depend on the person. Individual to individual, situation to situation. Well, and we're not static, right? Human beings, I mean, this is a very popular idea that human experience is linear or static, or that we grow just because there's the models of development, which are very popular. I think oftentimes when we're trying to tap into states, when we go through that process, we get disappointed because they're not. The paradox is it's probably more circular how we really are, body, mind, spirit. We've in our culture, cut ourselves off from the body, from the intuition, from the places that are necessary for us to help, for us to access wu-wei, right? We can't just think our way there, and that's a challenge for a lot of Westerners, no? Yeah, no, that's true. But there also are we do have some basic kind of ground level personality differences. Really? People are introverts or extroverts. Right, yeah, right. There's some evidence that I look at in the book that people have innate tendencies toward liberalism or conservatism. They tend to be people who trust their instincts, who think human nature is basically good, and hey, you don't need restrictions, just go with your instincts, go with the flow, versus people who find that a very dangerous idea. I think we need to rein in our instincts and have very clear rules and methods for doing things and ways of reshaping ourselves. So this is one of the other reasons I think no strategy ever wins out, is because just different strategies appeal to different people. Okay. And probably appeal to different people also at different life stages. Right. Something that might have appealed to you when you were ready to trade your molecular biology degree in for a motorcycle. Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking, extrovert, liberal.
No. Then maybe, or no, introvert turning to an extrovert. I don't know, right? So you were definitely in, or did those things stay static? I think extrovert introvert sort of stay static. Although
that's pretty consistent.
Although Jung said you should take the test over your life, and parts of it will change, but I haven't seen that happen for almost anybody.
Yeah.
Unless they were a fake extrovert, and then they realized they're really an introvert. I've seen that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but anyway.
We're weird mixes. So I'm actually an introvert. I'm a classic introvert, except I like short bursts of extroversion. So that's why lecturing was kind of fun. Working as a waiter all through grad school, and I continued to wait tables even when I was making more money doing translations, just because it gave me an outlet for being really extroverted for 4 hours. And then I go back to my apartment and hide and talk to anyone for 2 days.
I can believe it.
You know, people have different profiles,
right?
Personality traits, right?
Okay, so here you are. You find yourself. Okay, I'm a person who's an introvert, and I am really attracted to what you're saying. And Uwe sounds like, you know, I've played tennis. Maybe I know what the zone is, or I've played sports. And, you know, and I want to get more of the zone. That's kind of what, you know, maybe folks listening might be hearing on some very basic level. How do I get in the zone? And the answer is, it's a paradox. There is no one way. You have to try on some of these exercises, which we're going to talk about in a couple of the other segments coming up. So we're going to save that. But I want to take a leap, and it might be a gigantic leap for some people. We'll come back after the break. I want to talk about folks who their neurology, their neurochemistry is such that they've had a lot of trauma in their lives, right? So they're not really, and there's a lot of that happening in our culture. A lot of it happening in other cultures right now. Lots of trauma. We're going to talk neurobiology when we get back. Ted didn't know that, but that's what's happening next here on MaryanneLive, because I think it's a good question. Can everybody get Wu-Wei? Can everybody get Wu-Wei? Either way, we're going to find out when we get back right here on MaryanneLive. Don't touch that dial, everybody. Back in just a minute.
All right, y'all play Wu-Wei.
Wu-Wei.
Right. Okay, so
all right.
I'm ready when you are.
Are you ready, Ted?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay.
Neurobiology.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
5, 4, 3.
Hey everybody, welcome back to MaryanneLive. I am Maryanne Comaroto. We are trying not to try here, which for me, I'm sorry. I have struggled with this my entire life. I think
you seem naturally Uwe.
Do I?
In the zone, yeah.
I feel like that, yet I feel like I'm a person who has a lot of drive, a lot of oomph, and a lot of it's really natural. Hence, I have a tendency to kind of lean forward too far sometimes. I don't realize that there's a place where there's enough, like, if I'm in a school zone doing 80, something's wrong there. Do you know, some people are ooh-way, but they've got the gap, they've got a lead foot. I don't know. Again, it depends on the person. But I got to say, Ted Slingerland's book, Trying Not to Try, everybody needs to get a copy. Don't kid yourself unless you're a genius, which I know a lot of you out there are. You'll read it in one sitting, maybe 2 of you on the planet. But the rest of you, be prepared to try it on. It will grab you and take hold, and you will find it will be a Bible, a kind of companion that you keep with you, because the subject matter is so rich and dense and compelling. But we've got a hold of Ted. He's in the house. And right before the break, Ted, you and I were going to take a turn towards a little neurobiology, maybe even neuropsychology. Here's why. I'm interested in the idea of the triune brain, I think it's called, right? That we're finding that there's the brain stem, the mammalian brain, and then the frontal cerebral cortex, the neocortex, the newer part of the brain. They work in tandem, apparently, when it comes to, and we're social creatures. Everybody can follow this. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I'm fascinated here. These 3 parts of the brain, as it turns out, are more interconnected than previously thought. Now, why that's important to this conversation? What happens when trauma occurs, and there's a lot of research on trauma, and what that means is the brain stops working optimally in this sense. When something arises, a feeling or an experience in an optimal situation with your brain firing on all pistons, You feel it, it moves through you like a wave, but not much residue remains. You move on, right? Memories get stored, but when trauma occurs, you stop, the brain stops functioning as a unit. This is what I understand. Now, my question is, there's so much trauma on the planet, and I'm actually writing about trauma myself. I'm very interested. There's so much trauma politically, socially. I mean, the levels of trauma is staggering to me. That we have, I believe, a planet filled with people walking around, and I don't want to say PTSD, because I don't really know what that means, but I think some level of dissociation that has to do with what we're talking about here. I'm thinking Wu-Wei is a beautiful opportunity to find a way to reconnect those neural pathways, or however neuroplasticity works. Talk about this. You're the scientist here. You know about this kind of stuff. Is this making any sense?
Yeah, some of it's making sense. So if you're talking about kind of rehabilitation or taking people who have experienced extremely non-enriched environments, trying to get them to developmentally catch up with where they should be. This is where actually the mention and strategy of cultivating the sprout. And it's funny, so Mencius actually talks about it. He uses this agricultural metaphor. So our moral potentialities are like these sprouts. They're inside of us, but they're fragile. They can be damaged. If we have a bad environment early on, they can get kind of stunted. But he does seem to feel that a kind of trained coach can help you to both identify these sprouts and make them stronger. So there's a great story that I discussed in Trying Not to Try where he's talking to this king, this really evil king. This is just a horrible human being. And he tells him he has the potential to be a great king. And the king says, no, I don't. I like to drink and oppress people. And that's pretty much how I get my kids. I don't really, I care
evil
about
king.
And Mencius walks him through the story where he spared an ox that was being led to slaughter. And he gets him to see that he did it because he had this little stirring of compassion for the ox. And he gets him to realize what that stirring of compassion felt like, get him to realize how it's different from other feelings he might have had, and then gives them, it's a very short story, so we can't do too much, but he gives them basically a short training regimen for how to strengthen it.
Yeah.
So now practice feeling that, so you felt sorry for this ox while you're simultaneously starving to death the slave laborers who are building your lap pool that you ordered made, right? Maybe you could try to feel what you felt for that ox for those people. I think it's a similar issue we have when people, we very easily feel sorry for a little puppy in the window or, SPCA animals, and then we walk by a homeless person on the street. So our compassion is very intermittent sometimes. So one of the things that Mencius talks about is strategies for making it less intermittent and actually identifying the good things about the reaction and then learning how to systematically extend them to things we should be feeling them for.
Great.
And I look at some of the contemporary research on things like mindfulness practices or compassion training. Or actually, he talks at the beginning about gratitude training. There's some work there's good empirical work that this actually helps getting people to once a day think about how they're connected to other people or what they're grateful for. Actually helps them to see these opportunities later on. So there are things you can do. Yeah.
So Wu-Wei is a kind of facilitator for neuroplasticity, right? Why not?
Yeah, no, it's about reshaping your disposition, or essentially your embodied neurological reactions to the world.
I love it.
Reshaping them and pointing them in a new direction.
Right, and I think that practice, which a lot of us who are trying to help people move from suffering or struggling to, which is what you're doing, to trying to find some deep, meaningful relationship with your inner self and some power greater than yourself. So you can get into that zone. And when we come back, we're not going to break quite yet, but we're going to talk about some of the practices that you can try on. Most of them are in the book, Trying Not to Try. But we're going to talk about a few of them. But before we get there, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about, okay, so there's people who've suffered from trauma, people who've grown up in difficult childhood situations. We've been shaped, the sprouts theory is clear. What about the idea of the cultural consciousness? And Jung talked about it. Hillman, I love him for it. He talked about the cultural complex. One of the things we deal with as therapists in this world is, people come to you and they want to try to heal, but then they go back out into the same culture that in part helped shape or undo the sprout in some ways, if that makes sense. Talk a little about the cultural complexes and how Wu-Wei can address that.
Yeah, well...
Oh, yeah, we're going to go to break, but so hold that thought.
Very shortly, we have a culture that doesn't provide many opportunities for Wu-Wei and actively works against it on a lot of different fronts.
Yeah.
And it's very disturbing.
Which is...
I see the younger generations, I really wonder about their ability to get into the zone.
That's right.
So we can talk about that.
Yeah, and we're going to help, and we're going to bring you some practices. We'll get back after the break right here on MaryanneLive. Don't touch that dial. We're so glad you're here. Back in just a minute.
Okay. All right, guys.
Okay.
So last
Yeah, good stuff. I think it's a... Sorry, Kermit. Okay.
I mean, I'm sure it's going by fast for you guys.
It is.
Conversation going back and forth, like tennis match going on.
Yeah. It's kind of like we're lobbing the ball, though. It doesn't. For me, when I play tennis, I'm at the net and I'm going to crush you. So for me, that's for me. This is more. Really, you thought that about me?
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, and the driving thing. So that's my driving is the one area in life where I am the opposite. I'm from New Jersey originally, so I'm a Jersey driver.
Are you? And see, I drive like a grandma.
Oh, really? Okay.
I used to drive really fast, but now I just can't be bothered.
Yeah. No, I'm an aggressive, horrible
Are you?
Jersey driver, and nothing. I've tried some strategies with limited success.
No duh there.
No doubt. I've had like a complete absence of drive. Just when I get behind the wheel, it's very weird.
Yeah, it's Pavlovian. I bet you we could do some hypnotherapy there. And
I need something.
Yeah.
I need kind of clockwork orange.
Yeah.
Strap down, stop
right.
smoking, kind of drugs.
Trip.
Yeah, I need something serious now.
Lip my stocking. No, okay. Sorry. Kermit, we took you down the rabbit hole there. Okay, we're ready to go back to break, okay?
Okay, we're ready.
All right, here we go.
All right. And 5, 4, 3.
All right, everybody, Ted Slingerland's in the house, trying not to try. It's not an easy thing for some of us to do. We just like to push and try, and some of us feel it's just the American way. Well, we have covered a lot of territory that really is pointing to the idea that maybe we need to have a practice. Wu-Wei is a great one. It's thousands of years old, based on a lot of smart people sitting around going, I think this is a better philosophy. Well, you can check it out for yourself. The book, Trying Not to Try, is available wherever fine books are sold. This portion of the program we're going to talk about, and we're coming up to the top of the hour, some of the practices you can adopt. But on the heels of something, Ted, you and I were talking about just before the break, it's one thing to have a practice, to go to therapy, to do a lot of work on yourself, but boy, don't you find when you come out of that zone and boom, right in the middle of some guy flipping you off who's older than you, and you're thinking, oh, way, man, what is up with that? What is going on out there, Ted?
Yeah,
right?
Cultures vary wildly in their ability to foster Wu-Wei, and part of it has to do, this is from the Confucian strategy. The Confucian strategy is basically using ritualized behavior to, in a feedback loop, change the way people feel. So one of the examples I give is when I live in Canada now. I'm from New Jersey, lived in California for most of my adult life. Moved to Canada, to Vancouver, and my first week here, I was getting off the bus, one of these long buses, and as I'm getting off the bus, someone next to me goes, "Thank you," really loud to the bus driver. It was like a mile away from the bus. It scared the hell out of me. It hurt my ear, and I was like, whoa, what's going on here? And it's just, I was like, this is weird. So I thought it was weird for a few weeks, but what I started to realize slowly was that this politeness, what seems like hyper-politeness, has these interesting effects. So I think thanking the bus driver makes them feel, at some subliminal level, feel slightly better about their job. And then they're going to be more likely to wait for the guy running to the bus who's about to make it. And then that guy is going to get to work in a good mood instead of a bad mood because he made the bus. And so there's ways in which very tiny gestures can ripple out through a society and have these bigger effects. So there are ways in which these personal demeanor and even these ritualistic behaviors can really change the tone of a culture.
I love that.
And in this way, I think there's a lot of nice things about living in Canada.
Yes.
Overall, because
I have
more communitarian and
yes.
friendly.
I've not met a Canadian that I don't think is just deep to their core a nice person. Just there's no shadow. They're not shadowy or dark or repressed in some kind of important way. I don't know, but that's a whole other show. You should write a book about Canadians. Yeah, do a cross-cultural study, empirical evidence. But for now, we're going to talk about some of the, well, that's one great idea. You know, paying it forward is a way to look at that. You know, the simple gesture, the beautiful offer, it really does make a difference. And I sort of do that naturally. I don't even notice I do it. It feels good, and I want to say it out loud. I think it's a lovely thing to do. What can we do? What are a couple of exercises as we come up to the top of the hour that we can, you talk about them in your book, that we can offer folks so they can cultivate some more way in their lives, aside from buying the book?
Aside from buying the book, one of them is this, right? You spontaneously do this hello, thank you, gratitude thing. Most of us don't. So for people who don't, like myself, it probably would be good to adopt. You have to force it. So the Confucian strategy is that you don't feel it. You got to just do it. And if you do it enough, you'll start to feel it. That's the idea. So you have to. I've actually forced myself now to shout out "thank you," even if I'm the back of the long bus. And I still feel vaguely. I also, what changes actually, I feel if I don't do it, I feel guilty now. If I get off the bus without saying thank you, I feel vaguely bad about myself. So that's one thing, is you adopt these new practices. Another thing is, I think the biggest enemy to wu in our lives is a lack of space. So we've got, wu involves kind of integrating your tacit embodied knowledge with the goals you have consciously. It's kind of integrating system 1, system 2, hot and cold cognition. And that involves letting your unconscious mind speak when it needs to and have time to do its work. And I really worry about the fact that nowadays, so when I was a college student, I look at students on my campus, when I was a college student, I was forced to introspect several times a day because I'd walk from class to class, and there's nothing else you can do except look at the trees and think about things. What are you going to do? You're walking, you can't do anything else. Now you can do all sorts of things while you're walking, and you do. So now I see my students, and every single moment they're plugged into their devices, they're texting, they're listening to things in their headphones. Their waking lives are filled with constant stimuli. And I think the result is going to be an inability to integrate that knowledge in any substantive way. I don't feel like we really understand the impact. Because this is relatively recent, right?
Absolutely.
Smartphones are relatively recent. So we don't quite understand the implications.
We need stupid phones. Duh, phones.
We need duh phones.
Let's come up, you and Ted, you and I will come up with that.
Yeah, we can start a company.
Stupid phone. This doesn't work. There's nothing on the screen except little happy moments that say, breathe. Do you feel grateful? Me and you, Ted.
All right.
Here.
Yeah, we'll talk later. I'll have my people.
Okay, go ahead.
But this is a problem, right? And so there you need strategies for actually creating that space. So, resolve not to do anything on this bus ride. And instead of checking your email like for the 600th time today or texting, look out the window. Talk to the person next to you on the bus or something. There's good studies that show that people striking up conversations on buses create this positive affect in all of the people when they're interviewed later on. Even though you think people would be like, what are you doing? Why are you talking to me? Even in a big city, right? People like it. It's just people don't do it because we're more and more absorbed in our little weird digital cocoon.
They do love it, and really people like to talk about themselves. They're really desperate, and not necessarily in a narcissistic way, like, someone's interested. Someone's really wanting to know about me, you know?
Yep.
And more than Facebook. It's so interesting. Like, we have all these things that we have Facebook friends, but they're not really our friends, most of them. I mean, people, I don't want to get your emails. Do not send me an email based on what I just said. I'm sure they're your friends. I'm sure this is only me and Ted. I'm just saying. All right. Well, listen, we're coming up to the top of the hour. We need to wrap the program. There's so much here. What do we want to leave folks with in terms of your real offer here at the end of the hour, Ted?
Just be aware of the power of spontaneity and some of the tensions involved in getting it, and realizing that there are many areas in life where striving and trying and working are actually counterproductive. So I think at the very least, if people are quicker to realize when what they're doing is counterproductive, that will help at some level. Hey, I need a little bit of way here. Well,
yeah, we need a great load of ooh-way. Together we will ooh-way to the break and through, and let your fingers do the walking. Get a copy of Trying Not to Try. Get several, give them to your friends, and see if ooh-way is for you. Duh. We're going to be right back right after these messages. I'm Maryanne Comaroto. Back in just a minute.
All right. So
All right.
Your
a little wrap. Thank you.
You're ready. I'm ready. Okay.
All right. Sit tight, Ted. I'm going to thank you, and I think we're ready.
so we're ready.
We're going to wrap.
Okay.
So I'm going to say thank you again, and then I'm going to do my little wrap, and then I'll say goodbye to you after I hang up with my producer.
Okay, good.
Okay.
There you go. Okay, so in 5, 4, 3.
Thanks, everybody, for being with us today. Ted Slingerland's been in the house talking about his new book, Trying Not to Try. Go ahead on to MaryanneLive.com. You can find out more information about Ted. Check him out on Amazon.com. Ted, thanks so much for being with us today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. We want you to come back when you write that next book called Duh, or, whatever is next, which I love that for a title right there.
We have a business plan.
Good. And our business plan, Stupid Phones. We'll be giving you more information about that. Joining me next week, back in the house, Rick Hansen, PhD, Hardwiring Happiness, the new brain science of contentment, calm, and confidence. I think there's a theme going on. You want to be here on Maryanne Live, don't you know? Go to MaryanneLive.com for more information. Thanks for being with us. Blessings, everybody. We'll see you next time.
All right.
Thank you, Kermit.